Chapter 4-1, Subject Files. The four children, XXV, moniker assigned human pseudonym, XXV Anders Greylove, 25 days required before the embryo was fully developed into the state of a neonate. Many members inside. The facility had given the artiphenoid the pseudonym of the Raven due to his perceptive and sensory abilities, as subject XXV would effectively exhibit what is commonly referred to as bird's view. His youngest brother V often calls him Big, which is short for Big Brother, while his middle brother X II calls him a plurality of titles, too many to mention here. His only sister calls him by his designated name XXV. Date of creation, May 25, 1988. The human subjects used as the genetic basis for the creation of the artiphenoid were Dr. Alexander Sokolov, Subject X, Subject Y, and Subject Z. A mixture of animal clusters was introduced to provide the stability of the genetic material once inside the incubation chamber. Appearance: bold-headed, green-eyed, Caucasian male. Height: 188 centimeters, 6 foot 2 inches. Weight: 84 kilograms, 185 lbs. Personality: the subject is always reserved and rarely exhibits emotions. Talks in a monotone voice with only minor fluctuations observed. During extensive testing, the subject showed no signs of fear or panic. The Tiger test was utilized to measure the prior mentioned response. Subject was left in a cage with a length of 10 meters, 32 feet, with two fully grown, starved male tigers, and was told to cover a distance from one entrance to another. Progressed to do as instructed without any hesitation or signs of concern. A collar which was designed to administer a debilitating. Electrical shock was placed around both of the tigers' necks in the case of the Siberian felines attacking, however. This proved to be unneeded, as the tigers showed no intent or desire to attack the subject whilst he was making his way through the cage. When asked how he felt after egressing the cage, the subject answered with, "I felt nothing myself, however. I could sense what the Panthera tigris were feeling." Furthermore, the subject displays no signs of mental instability or any notable mental deviation, despite having an astronomically high IQ. A common theory surrounding XXV's emotional capabilities is one that the artiphenoid does not feel emotions, but rather calculates them. Based on the situation, XXV attempts his best to display certain emotions as deemed appropriate and fitting. Physical cognitive abilities. 2 IQ tests were administered, one at the age of 5 and one at the age of 15. Both tests had shown the IQ of the subject to be immeasurable. The subject would solve all problems at such speeds that no current human metric would suffice, therefore no numerical value could be assigned. Talks of creating a different metric to measure the subject's intelligence did exist, however, in the end were deemed unnecessary. Subject exhibits superhuman recognition of patterns and is fully capable of solving complex mathematical equations in his head. The subject is effectively a humanoid calculator. The subject is capable of visualizing rooms he had never been inside of based on analytical sense and preliminary knowledge alone, and is capable of discerning the amount of people inside those same rooms based on sound recognition. Audiometry tests showed that subject is capable of hearing and recognizing pitches far beyond those than the capability of humans. Visual acuity examination had showed once again an ability far beyond the human spectrum. Subject is capable of sensing and smelling the pheromones released by humans when exhibiting emotions. As a result of this, subject XXV is fully capable of telling when someone is lying or feeling fear elation, and etc., additionally, due to the highly increased sensory perception. Subject is capable of some levels of precognition, as XXV is often able to ascertain a person's following action before they are fully aware of it themselves even. Subject possesses photographic memory alongside the ability to read at unprecedented speeds. 1 page a second. As a result of this, Subject has read all the books inside the facility and inside multiple libraries around the town, is able to learn any and all languages. At the time of testing, Subject was completely fluent in 50 languages, is fully capable of grasping any scientific concept, no matter how complex. In fact, Subject often explains to the research team their own theories better than they can understand the concepts themselves. XXV is capable of visualizing and engineering equipment with ease and has done this on multiple occasions. Some examples include a sonic device that is capable of producing varying degrees of effects on those who register the resonance. The effects range from minor anemia to full-on immobilization. The device was called the sonic parasite by the staff, as it works by attaching a certain frequency of sound to the already existing sound waves once ejected from the emitter. The size of the emitter is quite inconspicuous, easily fits inside the palm of the hand. The amount and volumes of noise dictate the effectiveness of the parasite, as more noise means more waves it can attach itself to, hence increasing the potency of the debilitating effect, while louder resonances increase its travel distance. When administered alongside a gunshot, those who had registered the frequency experience severe nausea and eventual loss of conciseness. An NRG cube is what the research team named a device conceptualized and drafted by XXV, a compact cube capable of containing inside itself a continual destabilization of matter, which in turn would produce an outburst of energy equal to those of a nuclear explosion. This energy could be harvested and utilized as a substitute to fossil fuels as proposed by XXV. The matter inside would continue to produce this reaction due to the constant instability indefinitely, as long as the appropriate thermal conditions are met. XXV had proposed reaching destabilization through colder temperatures rather than warmer ones. However, his work on this project was halted as it was deemed that the appropriate matter capable of the above described had not yet been discovered. The genus plague was a biological weapon conceptualized and nearly produced by XXV. Due to the fact that major genetic differences exist between ethnicities and races, the plague would isolate and infect only those specific strains it was manufactured to. However, XXV had deemed the project as a failure in the end, as the true isolation of only the strains desired was judged as a task too difficult, since, of course, races and ethnicities also share many more genetic structures than those that differ between them. The concept was also deemed too unethical, and a weapon far too powerful in the case of it ever being perfected. All the surrounding research of XXV's biological weapon was destroyed by the research team. The Artifinoid was entirely content with this decision. Living Kevlar was a concept drafted and constructed by XXV, which was effectively an armor capable of self-regenerating damage done to it. The material used to craft this was the hybrid between reptilian DNA and the DNA of his younger brother X2, in an effort to produce extremely tough Kevlar capable of healing itself. As mentioned before, this material would effectively act as skin while even containing pores for oxygen intake. Early prototypes were in fact made by XXV, however, they would always eventually shrivel up, losing its toughness in its entirety due to the lack of water. XXV would abandon the design as he was unable to create the biological mechanism to constantly provide the armor with the water required. There were more creations and concepts presented by XXV, however. The Artiphenoid would eventually be designated in his totality to the Artificial Creation Program in order to establish the new wave of genetic fusion while using the DNA of the Artiphenoids themselves. XXV's potential was deemed virtually limitless. However, his personality does in fact dictate a limitation, as the Artiphenoid greatly lacks in free will, often preferring the guidance of another in order to truly unlock his potential. This guidance was mostly provided by Dr. Sokolov himself, however. Later on, the Artiphenoid would also become heavily influenced by his younger brother, XXV. XXV is not always capable of forming his own decisions. Before this was discovered, XXV could often be found in his room, sitting while completely motionless as he waited for instructions. This discovery served as a point of major contention between many scientists inside the facility, as some would deem such a development as a failure, while others would consider it success since XXV's main designation was one of a combatant. XXV's physical capabilities were quite impressive as well, albeit not as impressive as the cerebral ones. Strength testing results indicated the ability to bench press 636 kilograms, 1,400 lbs, and the ability to deadlift 1,000 kilograms, 2,200 lbs. XXV was able to reach a top running speed of 56 kph, 35 miles per hour, while his reaction speed reached subsonic levels of Mach 3, 230 miles per hour. Subject possesses incredible stamina. A test utilizing a simple treadmill was used with the subject running at a constant pace of 16 kph, 10 miles per hour. XXV ran for almost a week straight, 160 hours, without any stops for rest and food before signs of major fatigue began to manifest. XXV is an exceptional fighter. Subject has the ability to learn moves after first demonstration while mastering them almost immediately after. As a result, Subject XXV is fully proficient in a multitude of martial arts. Sleep deprivation tests showed no deterioration present to the cerebellum, among other parts of the brain, for up to 9 days. The subject was able to function at full capacity without a single minute of sleep during that interval. The subject does normally sleep 1 hour a day. Starvation testing showed that Subject XXV is able to last for 27 days without food before the body resorts to autosarcophagy. Subject lasted up to 10 days before major damage due to dehydration began to occur. The caloric intake the subject requires was calculated to be at 280 calories a day. Subject showed an extreme resistance to many different known human viruses and diseases once exposed to them. Cold resistance testing showed that subject was capable of fully functioning at temperatures as low as 50 Celsius, 58 Fahrenheit, before signs of hypothermia began to manifest. Subject does possess a healing factor. As a part of the resilience testing, subject was shot with an 11.5mm, 45 cal pistol round in a non-lethal part of the body. After the removal of the bullet, subject was provided with medical aid, and after that, a full recovery was made after only 2 hours. XXV has an increased pain tolerance. The subject was asked to rate the pain after the gunshot test was administered on a 10 scale. Subject XXV answered with a 4/10. Humanization. When introduced to different popular human cultures, subject showed absolutely no interest in any of them. While the subject is effectively capable of mastering anything, XXV prefers to read when not spending time with his siblings, with his research or training, only leaves the premises of the facility to go to the library. When asked if he identified as a human, the answer was always no. Sexuality, asexual, does not possess a sexual drive, expresses no interest and shows no signs of attraction to either gender. Role and dynamic within the four, subject is not the leader of the group. However, since he is smartest by far, he is often asked advice by the rest of his siblings. When asked whether he loves his siblings, XXV responds with, "No, I don't need to love them. I possess a genetic bond with them." He would not elaborate further on this. Dr. Gray believes that this genetic bond XXV described is love in human terms, or at least is what humans would use to categorize such emotion. This, however, is not confirmed by XXV himself. XXV does seem to have a heightened level of respect, in human terms, for his younger brother, X II, often acts as a father figure to his youngest brother, the sixth, and has a very professional relationship with his sister Nine, often filling the role of a tutor to her as she is quite intelligent in her own right. Subject XXV is considered a successful creation. Chapter 4-2. Subject Files. The four children Ninx. Monica assigned human pseudonym X Alexandra Greylove. 9 days required before the embryo was fully developed into the state of a neonate. Was given the nickname the Lioness due to her agility and speed. Her creator, Dr. Gray, sometimes refers to her as the Goddess. Her brother, Sate, often calls her Seus, while her middle brother, Extus Nth, calls her many different titles. Too many to mention here, while also too risky and offensive, as many are of a sexual nature. Her brother XXV calls her by her assigned name. Date of creation, May 9th, 1992. The human subjects used as the genetic basis for the creation of the artiphenoid were Dr. Marcus Gray, Dr. Alexander Sokolov, Subject X, Subject Y, and Subject Z. A mixture of animal clusters was introduced to provide the stability of the genetic material once inside the incubation chamber. Appearance: blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Caucasian female. Height: 165 centimeters, 5 foot 5 inches. Weight: 58 kilograms, 128 lbs. Personality: IX is very outgoing and social, much like her brother Sixth. Unlike her older brother XXV, IX shows a vast array of emotions, ranging from happiness to sadness. It is rare to see IX sad, however, but such reactions have been observed. IX does not appear to feel fear, as was shown by the tiger test. Once placed inside the cage with the same 2 starved male tigers, IX was asked to make her way from one entry of the cage to the other. She obliged, however. On this occasion the tigers did attack the artiphenoid. The command to activate the shock collar was given, but was quickly cancelled in order to observe the unexpected development inside the cage. IX was able to outmaneuver the tundra cats with great ease, jumping over them and even outrunning them. Yix swiftly reached the exit door without a single scratch on her. When asked how she felt when inside the construct, Ix excitedly responded with, "Can we do it again?" Ix can be considered flirtatious, but definitely not promiscuous. X is very intelligent and is eager to take on any academic challenges and training regimens, as she always displays the most excitement for the prior mentioned. Physical, cognitive abilities, IQ test administered at the age of 5 and age of 15 showed to be stable and conclusive. IQ of subject D, 160. While not as intelligent as her oldest brother XXV, IX still displays great ability when it comes to the science behind the artificial creation program and is quite quick to pick up on complex scientific concepts, does not possess the precognitive abilities of her older brother, nor does she possess his perceptive ability. IX is fluent in 6 languages: English, Russian, Slovenian, French, German, Spanish. Audiometry tests revealed that the artiphenoid is capable of registering frequencies beyond that of a human. However, this ability is not even remotely near equaling that of XXV. Visual acuity examination showed IX once again easily surpassing the typical human, however, once again nowhere near the ability of her oldest brother. IX's physical capabilities are also quite impressive, with speed being the category where the artiphenoid truly stands out. Subject 9 is capable of reaching a top running speed of 120 kph, 75 miles per hour, and shown to have reflexes reaching supersonic speeds, registering at Mach 2.5, 1,920 miles per hour. More extensive testing was done to further elaborate on her immense reaction time and had shown that the lioness is capable of dodging bullets at close ranges. IX was able to easily dodge bullets fired out of handguns. This led to further testing. Eventually, a 50 cal sniper round with a weight of 750 grains was fired at the artiphenoid while she was positioned at a distance 2.5 kilometers, 1.6 miles. IX's reactions times were quick enough to dodge the sniper round, travelling at 3.57 kph, 1,900 miles per hour. IX's acrobatic ability is yet another strong point for the artiphenoid. Balancing tests were administered while utilizing 10 4-meter, 13-foot, high wooden utility poles with a top circumference of 22 centimeters, 8.6 inches, which were planted 3 meters, 10 feet, apart. The artiphenoid jumped on top of the first one with ease and progressed to complete the 30-meter, 98-foot course effortlessly without losing her balance even once, while leaping from one wooden pole onto the other seamlessly. More balancing tests were done with the use of a 20-meter, 65-foot-long tightrope. IX ran across the entirety of the rope without the use of a balancing stick. IX is capable of achieving a vertical jump of 8 meters, 25 feet. IX's fastest punch was registered at 251 kph, 157 miles per hour. A test utilizing a simple treadmill was used to gauge IX's stamina. Subject was able to run for 120 hours at a constant speed of 40 kph, 25 miles per hour, before damage due to fatigue began to manifest. Strength testing showed IX possessing the ability to bench press 455 kilograms, 1,001 lbs, and the ability to deadlift 727 kilograms, 1,600 lbs. Sleep deprivation tests showed an ability to last 11 days before damage to the cerebellum and other parts of the brain began to manifest. The subject normally sleeps 2 hours a day. IX was able to last 30 days without food before the body would resort to autosarcophagy, while it took 12 days without water for signs of damage due to severe dehydration to manifest. The caloric intake required for the subject was calculated at 250 calories a day. Much like her oldest brother, XXV, subject possesses extreme resistances to many common human viruses and diseases once exposed to them. Cold resistance testing showed an ability to function at temperatures as cold as 40 Celsius, 40 Fahrenheit, before signs of hypothermia began to manifest. Subject does possess a healing factor. Gunshot test utilizing a .45 cal pistol round to a non-lethal area of the body showed a full recovery after the removal of the bullet with the application of medical aid, to have taken about 3 hours. This is slightly longer than the recovery rate of her oldest brother XXV. IX has an increased pain tolerance. When asked to rate the pain of the gunshot on a 10 scale, the subject answered with a 5/10. Humanization. When presented with popular culture, IX was highly selective. When asked if she enjoyed what she heard, X responded tepidly. Asked whether she identified as human on multiple occasions, and the response was always no. Her hobbies include reading, gardening, and dancing. Only with her brother Fifth, inventing engineering, when with XXV, spends most of her time with her brother the Sixth. Sexuality, inconclusive. While the subject does seem to find men attractive, she does not express much interest in them sexually, with certain exceptions. Refer to the Nova Street incident. Deemed heterosexual for the time being. Signs of paraphilia. It is uncertain whether IX possesses any natural sexual drive. Role and dynamic within the four. IX is the second smartest of the four, so she often acts as the voice of reason, often even resembling a mother, though mostly specifically when it comes to VI. EX and VI are virtually inseparable and refer to themselves as twins. Has a tremendous amount of respect for XXV and has a puzzling relationship with XVII. The two get along just fine, despite mocking one another constantly. Subject Tynangs is considered a successful creation. Chapter 4-3. Subject Files. The 4 children. V. Monica assigned human pseudonym V. Lucas Greylove. 6 days required before the embryo was fully developed into the state of a neonate. Was given the nickname the Ox due to his incredible strength and the expression strong as an ox. His sister Angs often calls him QTP. His brother Extasat refers to him by many different titles, too many to mention here. His brother XXV refers to him by his designated name. Date of creation, May 6, 1992. The human subjects used as the genetic basis for the creation of the artifinoid were Luka Krajin Z. Dr. Alexander Sokolov, Subject X, Subject Y, and Subject Z. A mixture of animal clusters was introduced to provide the stability of the genetic material once inside the incubation chamber. Appearance: blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Caucasian male. Height: 201 centimeters, 6 foot 7 inches. Weight: 140 kilograms, 308 lbs. Personality: very outgoing, very friendly, sensitive, and kind. VI is very childlike at times, though not immature. VI is generally always happy with very rare moments of sadness. VI does not feel fear or anger, with only one exception. Refer to the serpent incident. When the tiger test was administered, subject was excited upon entering the cage. "They are so adorable," was the first line the subject articulated upon noticing the 2 starved Siberian male tigers. As per usual, the subject was told to make his way from one entrance to the other. The subject obliged without any hesitation. Just like in the case with his sister, the tigers attacked the subject one at a time, however. The shock collar command was once again cancelled in order to observe the unexpected interaction that was taking place inside the cage. Subject Sight was able to easily subdue the 272 kilograms, 600 lbs, attacking cat before progressing to pet him. The second cat halted the attack once this interaction was observed. VI held the animal in his grasp while playing with him despite the tiger showing major resistance. Basically, it looked like VI was playing around with a kitten. Eventually, subject was instructed to egress the cage, which he did oblige with, despite being visibly saddened by the request. Once outside the cage, and when asked how he felt, the subject responded with, "I felt great." Later on, the subject revealed to the research team that he named the two tigers Shere Khan and Raja, the names of the tigers from Jungle Book and Aladdin films respectively. Vi enjoys talking to those that surround him greatly, whether it is scientists, his siblings, or any other members of the facility staff. Vi shows genuine interest in those who he communicates with. Vi is extremely eager to take on physical training, yet struggles with the academic side of things, and as a result, often shows reservations towards it. Physical cognitive abilities. IQ tests were administered at the ages of 5 and 15 and proved to be stable and conclusive. IQ of subject, Vi, 130. VI does not possess precognitive or perceptive abilities of his oldest sibling XXV. VI greatly struggles to grasp many of the scientific concepts and processes behind the artificial creation program. Subject for 6 is fully fluent in 2 languages, Slovenian and English. Audiometry and visual acuity testing demonstrated an ability to recognize patterns and frequencies exceeding those of humans. Via's ability matched Ein's almost exactly. In fact, however, as was the case with his sister, Via's audio and visual capabilities are not near those of his oldest brother XXV. VI's reaction time was measured to be in the subsonic levels at Mach 176 miles per hour, to be more precise. VI is capable of reaching a top running speed of 43 kph, 27 miles per hour, while stamina testing showed an ability to run as long as 80 hours at the constant speed of 13 kph, 8 miles per hour, before major damage caused by fatigue was manifested, albeit special arrangements had to be made when testing VI's stamina, as the Artiphenoid would become hungry every 2 or so hours. VI was provided with liquid nutrition during the stamina testing at specific intervals in order to maintain the running pace. VI's acrobatic ability is impressive for someone his size, however, is not considered noteworthy when compared to his sister 9. Vi's strength capabilities, however, is another story entirely, as the subject possesses what could surely be described as true Herculean strength. In order to accommodate for the strength testing, major modifications to the testing equipment had to be made. A boat frame was brought in and modified in order to be utilized as a power bar, since the regular ones would bend due to the amount of weight the subject was capable of lifting. Once all of the adjustments were made, strength tests showed subject V's ability to deadlift 8,636 kilograms, 19,000 lbs, at the very least. As the subject was able to lift it more than once, the weight on top of the boat frame was provided by vehicles which were tightly secured once on the frame itself. The staff did run into problems concerning the space required for the vehicles, as the 86, 36 weight is considering the size of the frame. Subject's ability to bench press was at 5,615 kilograms, 12,350 lbs. However, it assumed that the subject is capable of lifting even more due to the difficulty of. Further strength testing was suspended as the results were deemed more than satisfactory. Subject's force when striking was calculated to be at around 203 and 700 and 476.09 Newton square metre, around 31,000 psi. Starvation tests administered had demonstrated the subject to be closer to a human than the rest of his siblings. VI's body showed signs of autosarcophagy only after 72 hours, which is directly in line with humans. The same was shown for dehydration tests, as it also took 3 days without water before major damage started to manifest. The caloric intake that VI required was calculated and was shown to be at around 2,500 calories a day, which once again lines up with that of a typical human, however. The subject often consumes more than 25,000 calories a day. His body showed to be more than capable of storing and burning those calories. Sleep deprivation tests displayed an ability to last for 6 days before major damage started to occur in the cerebellum and other parts of the brain. This is a longer interval when compared to regular humans. Subjects sleeps for 4 hours a day normally. Subject VI possesses an extreme resistance to common human diseases and viruses, much like XXV and IX. Cold resistance tests showed an ability to fully function in temperatures as low as 65 Celsius, 85 Fahrenheit, before signs of hypothermia began to manifest. When tested for toughness, interesting results were displayed. Due to the incredible muscle density that the subject possesses, lower caliber rounds, 21 and 357, would not perforate through the subject's muscle tissue and, in fact, would become lodged inside near the point of entry. A 45 cal Magnum round was utilized and did in fact perforate the tissue. However, once removed and with the wound treated, subject was able to recover fully in just a single hour. This did demonstrate a healing factor slightly above those of his sister Nines and his oldest brother XXV. When asked to rate the pain on the 10 scale, subject responded with a 2.5/3. Humanization. When presented with popular culture, VI became somewhat addicted to it. VI loves television series, music, and dance. He loves food, cooking, and fashion. VI brought a puppy back to the facility and was allowed to keep it eventually. When asked if he identifies as human, VI answered with a yes. He was heavily reprimanded by XXV because of this. Spends most of his time hanging out with his sister Nines, eating, cooking, and working out. Sexuality. Heterosexual. Does possess a sexual drive. Is fascinated by Christina Aguilera, Britney Spears, Aaliyah, and other pop stars. Role and dynamic within the four. Subject Sick is viewed as the child one out of the four due to his personality, but is not disrespected because of this. He often needs his sister to break down what was said by XXV, as Vi is the least intelligent out of the four. This, however, does not mean he is stupid. VI listens to all of his siblings, most especially to Xthiov. Vi loves all his siblings unconditionally and completely adores his sister, as they are inseparable. However, due to the Artiphenoid's inability to hurt living things, Subject the Sick was classified as a failed creation. This, of course, does not mean that VI was to be discarded, as he still plays a major role within the four. Chapter 4-4. Subject Files. the 4 children, the Feanth, moniker assigned human pseudonym, Xvimikolo Grailov, 17 days required before the embryo was fully developed into the state of a neonate, was given the nickname La Serpiente del Eden, or the Serpent of Eden in English, by a Spanish nurse, Valeria Martinez, who also served as one of the genetic bases for his creation. Some staff members would eventually just call him the Serpent. All of his siblings refer to him by his assigned moniker. Date of creation, May 17, 1990. The human subjects used as the genetic basis for the creation of the artiphenoid were Dr. Marcus Gray, Valeria Martins, Subject X, Subject Y, and Subject Z. A mixture of animal clusters was introduced to provide the stability of the genetic material once inside the incubation chamber. Appearance: dark-haired, brown-eyed Caucasian male. Height: 188 centimeters, 6 foot 2 inches. Weight: 90 kilograms, 198 lbs. Personality: very abrasive in nature and highly egotistical, though hardly foolish. Has a tendency to increase his speaking volume suddenly before abruptly returning to his regular tone. This tendency is quite arbitrary in nature. Jokes around often, mostly in dark humour. Though does not start off angry, does get irritated quickly and escalates quickly as well. Has a tendency for random acts of violence. Because of this, XXII is only interacted with while either his brother XXV is present or his creator, Dr. Gray. XVI seems to listen to those two the most, and is most stable around them. Seems to be capable of love, yet this emotion is highly reserved for only certain individuals. Subject greatly lacks in empathy and compassion. Complete absence of fear, in fact. Subject could be referred to as fear-inducing as every single member of the staff, with the exceptions of Dr. Gray, Dr. Sokolov, his siblings, and Luka Krajenchi. Is terrified of X. The tiger test demonstrated some major difficulties when being administered. Subject was unwilling at first, and only through his older brother XXV's explanation of the procedure, XXIX eventually did come around, so to speak. Shortly after the subject entered the cage, one of the researchers jokingly said, "We probably should have put the shock collar on XVI and not on the cats." This joke would prove to be quite factual, however. The researcher did add after his initial comment, "Nobody, please tell XXII said that." Nobody has told XXII that he said that. XVI once again showed a lack of compliance once inside the cage, as the subject would just stand still, ignoring the instructions given entirely. XXV once again had to be brought in to motivate his younger brother. XTI reluctantly obliged. Once near, the cats attacked the artiphenoid one by one, and just like the times prior, the shock command was cancelled to observe the development inside the cage. The development inside the cage was not a pretty sight. Once one of the Siberian tigers attacked the artiphenoid, the feline bit into his forearm with all his might. However, this bite did not cause the most typical reaction of a shattered bone, but rather a reaction of the subject becoming extremely angry. With the tiger's jaw still locked on the artiphenoid's forearm, XVI took it down and then progressed to assail the cat's cranium. With just a few hits, XVI had shattered the tiger's skull. However, while attacking the tiger, the subject began to shout at the top of his lungs. Some of the things he yelled were, "What makes you think you can attack me, you jungle faggot trash? And I will rape and dismember Simba in front of you." This anger tantrum would continue for quite some time as XTHI continued to hit the feline long after it had passed away. The second tiger ran off and hid shortly after XTHIAN started to shout. Eventually the subject would exit the cage. No inquiries were made of XTHIANs once that occurred. However, at the request of his younger sister Nying, the research staff did not let Subject VI become aware of the tiger's passing, the very same one whom Vi had named Raja. AX did not want her brother to become saddened by the news. XTHIAN has a tendency to get many things wrong when he is talking to others, often using the wrong denominations as substitutes. This is especially the case when XVI attempts to use common maxims or idioms. In the case of previously stated, Simba was a lion, not a tiger. The tiger was one from a tundra and not a jungle, and of course the spectrum of human sexuality does not apply to animals as it regards XTHIAN's homosexual slur. Subject XTHIAN is a drug addict with stimulants being his forte, as it may. While it is impossible for the subject to develop a physical dependency due to his healing factor, XVI is psychologically dependent. When reaching prolonged intervals of time without the administration of drugs into his system, the subject becomes mentally unstable and extremely violent. As a result, the subject is provided with amphetamine salts every 4 hours. Physical, cognitive abilities. IQ test administered at the age of 5. Subject refused testing down the line. Proved to be stable and conclusive. IQ of subject X 100. Does not possess the precognitive or perceptive abilities of his oldest brother XXV. The subject is somewhat capable of understanding many of the scientific concepts utilized in the artificial creation program, yet often refuses academic sessions explaining the processes. XVI is fully fluent in 3 languages: Slovenian, English, Spanish. Audiometry and visual acuity testing showed the subject to be on par with humans. This is very surprising and is a point of major frustration for XXI in his ego. Reaction times of the subject were measured to be at a subsonic level, Mach 2, 153 miles per hour. Subject XVI is capable of reaching a top running speed of 50 kph, 31 miles per hour. XTHIAN's acrobatic abilities are not particularly noteworthy when compared to his sister, albeit XTHIAN is much more agile than a regular human. The administration of the strength test on XVI proved to be a difficult task. However, this was the case not because of his immense strength, but rather because of his lack of cooperation. Subject had to be once again convinced by his older brother XXV to participate in the tests. XVI's ability to deadlift was recorded to be at 1,365 kilograms, 3,000 lbs. However, the subject did refuse the bench press, stating that it is boring and worthless. Subject XTHIAN was asked repeatedly to participate by one of the researchers, to whom XTHIAN responded with, "You asked me that again. I will wrap your mouth around your asshole so that I can fuck both holes at the same time." No more inquiries were made of XTHIANs on that day. However, it was deemed safe to assume that the subject is capable of bench pressing around 865 kilograms. 1,900 lbs. Toughness testing was commenced, and this is where the artifinoid truly stands out. It starts with the subject's healing factor, as it is by far the strongest out of all the 4 artifinoids. XVI is capable of healing damage in mere seconds. In fact, this makes certain other qualities possible. One instance of this would be a complete immunity to known human viruses and diseases. Subject is also assumed, this was never tested due to outright refusal, to have nearly infinite stamina, due to the fact that the damage accumulated from fatigue in forms of muscle tissue tears, or cardiovascular strain, specifically on the myocardium, would be healed faster than it could accumulate. The same concept applies to the subject's encephalon, since the damage that would normally be caused to the organ, because of sleep deprivation, is once again healed faster than it can accumulate. This makes it so that the artiphenoid does not require sleep, and this is very much the case. Subject Ecdysis never sleeps. Food deprivation testing showed an ability to last without food for an astounding 6 months before the body would resort to autosarcophagy. Subject's healing factor is attributed to this prolonged interval of time as well. Dehydration testing showed an ability to last for 14 days before severe, near irreparable damage began to manifest. The daily caloric intake that the subject requires was calculated to be 40 calories. Subject was able to fully function temperatures as low as 85 Celsius, 121 Fahrenheit. Further testing was halted. However, it wasn't done because the subject would begin experiencing hypothermia, but rather because it was becoming increasingly more and more difficult of creating such low temperatures artificially. Furthermore, the coldest place on the planet, on the continent of Antarctica, does not get much colder than the max temperature reached when testing with XVI. When the subject was shot with a .45 cal pistol round, the bullet failed to perforate the skin. 50 cal pistol round was administered instead. However, the end results were the same. During testing, subject began to provoke the researchers to fire the round into his head. This area of the body is clearly not considered non-lethal, however, after some discussions with Dr. Gray, Dr. Sokolov, and even XXV. Permission was granted to fulfill the artiphenoid's request. Subject XDI was shot with a .50 cal mag round directly at the cephalic region. Once the shot registered, subject XVI fell down and remained immobile for approximately 3 seconds. However, after the prior mentioned time, the subject was once again witnessed moving. Subject was back up on his feet as if nothing had ever happened in approximately 7 seconds. During the time the subject spent on the ground, he was in fact in the state of unconsciousness brought on by a major concussion. With the bullet failing to penetrate the skull, the impact of the shot resulted in the subject's brain bouncing inside the cranium, causing the loss of responsiveness via concussion. However, subject's healing ability repaired the damage with such speeds that the artiphenoid was able to regain consciousness mere moments after initially collapsing. Subject possesses extremely high heat resistance. An RPG was fired directly at the ground near the subject's feet. XVI was propelled upwards, hit his head on the metal beam inside the compact construct before eventually landing back down on the ground. After approximately 10 seconds, the subject was back upright as if nothing happened, with no burns on his skin to be observed. At the end of the gunshot testing, when the subject was asked to rate the pain on a 10 scale, XVI responded with, "Have you ever been bitten by a mosquito?" 0/10 was officially recorded. Humanization. When presented with popular culture, XDI was either disgusted or disinterested. When asked whether he identified as a human, subject always responded with, "No." When not being trained or tested, XVI is usually walking the streets or using drugs. When not doing any of the above mentioned, he could be found spending time with his oldest brother XXV or mocking, flirting with his younger sister. And sexuality, inconclusive, does not seem to show attraction towards either gender but is sexually capable. Nova Street incident, severe signs of paraphilia. It is uncertain whether XVI possesses any natural sexual drive, role and dynamic within the four. XVI is definitely the leader within the group. He is not the one to concoct a plan, but is the one who always has the final word. He is not as intelligent as IX and XXV, and he is readily able to admit that. This hardly means he is stupid, however. Kexthayan does say that he loves all of his siblings, though he does point out that he is annoyed by VI the most. XVII and XXV are extremely close. Spends least time with IX, but the two still show a strong relationship. The artiphenoid is designated as a success. Addendum to the subject's profile due to newer developments. While points of major contention exist between the research team for the most appropriate classification, XVII is designated as a serial killer with a sadistic personality disorder. This is, of course, a human designation entirely, however, the subject fits the profile quite well. As was recently discovered, at the age of 11, the subject began to kill animals, starting with domestic felines. Subject would capture cats and throw them into the incinerator while describing the pleasure of watching them slowly burn in great detail. XTI would eventually move on to canines. Subject would capture dogs and break their hind legs. Once again, the subject would describe achieving gratification as he watched them helplessly crawl around while crying in agony. At the age of 13, XTI had made his first human kill. The boy murdered 2 local bullies in self-defense, breaking one's neck while bashing the other one's head. He reported dumping both bodies into a local river. At the age of 14, XTI killed a local prostitute, dismembering her corpse shortly after. A year later, XTI tortured and killed a local businessman while he was at his home. However, on this occasion, the young artiphenoid was witnessed leaving the crime scene. At night time, when XTI was exiting the premises of the businessman after torturing him, a town woman saw XTI for a brief moment. She was not able to discern his facial features, however. Sextiand was wearing the typical all-white facility attire, and this was what the woman remembered for certain. Once she realized that the man inside that house was dead, the woman went straight to the police to report the incident. After she was given the gruesome details of the murder, and when asked for a description of the perpetrator, the woman told the investigators that it was the devil in white. However, the local newspapers had made an error when printing the headline. Instead of the previously listed, the papers printed the title of The White Devil. XVII's creator, Dr. Gray, had known about XVII's actions before, yet chose to keep it as a secret due to potential embarrassment it would cause him. As Dr. Gray's intentions when creating XVI were rather unusual as well. Having suffered physical and sexual abuse as a child, Dr. Gray developed severe paraphilia, and as a result, had initially intended for XTI to be a sexual masochist, however. What the doctor was actually able to create was an extreme sadist. While much of this information was eventually discovered by the research team with the help of XXV, it is still not known how Gray was able to achieve such results. Dr. Gray was able to effectively preload a certain personality parameter on a genetic level at the start, since typically the above-mentioned disorders are developed through exposure to certain environments or are a byproduct of sexual physical abuse at early stages of formation. What's even more surprising, however, is that Gray was able to achieve this with his other creation IX as well, albeit to a lesser extent. Subject 9 showed minor signs of sexual sadism. Refer to the Nova Street incident. It was eventually revealed that Dr. Gray derives pleasure from watching sadistic sexual acts, specifically when those acts are perpetrated by women onto men. It does have to be restated that it is not fully understood just how the Doctor was able to accomplish such deviations with both of his creations. When his esteemed colleague Dr. Sokolov found out, Gray was deeply embarrassed. However, to the surprise of most, Dr. Sokolov was very impressed. Furthermore, Gray was ready to label X the Seconds as a failed creation, but Dr. Sokolov disagreed, stating that XVI is a perfect creation in many ways, as someone as sadistic and resilient as him would not only instill fear, but would even define it. Any nation would surrender in mere seconds when approached by an army of XVIs. Dr. Alexander Sokolov. Incident reports. The Nova Street incident, as recited by IX and XIIO, March 19, 2008. Time of the incident 23:30, 2:30, while getting ready to leave the facility and go on one of his typical walks. XA, age 18 at the time of the incident, was approached by IX, age 16 at the time of the incident, who expressed interest in joining him. XII was not too warm to the idea at first, but IX was able to convince him, pointing out that they do not get to spend as much time together. This is true, as XVI and IX are seldom seen together comparatively to the rest of the children. As been told by them both, there was no specific plan, and IX did not quite know where he usually goes to or what he even does. They spent about an hour walking and talking before reaching Nova Street, at which point XVI stopped, surveyed the area, and started to approach a house. IX reported asking XVI what he was doing, but no response was ever provided. XVI circled the aforementioned house before locating a cellar door with a lock that led inside the little isolated house. Ixians, though not as strong as his younger brother the Sixth, still is an exceptionally strong specimen. He was able to remove the lock and proceeded to enter the cellar door. Ix reported staying silent and following him. Inside the house was a single man, and he was asleep at the time of the entry. XDI then proceeded to knock him out, relocate him to the cellar, and bind him with rope. IX knew where this was going quite some time ago, but offered no refutation. Xaxthound found a knife as the man began to regain consciousness. Skayan then bent him over the chair he was on, stripped him of his clothes, and anally penetrated the man with the knife. The gag on man's mouth kept him from making too much noise. IX described feeling an intense sexual arousal while watching XDID torture the man. As XVI, I would speed up and slow down the insertion of the knife. IX would get more and more turned on, as it was described. IX described that the muffled screams of the man amplified her arousal even more. XI noticed IX's behaviour, stopped the act with the man, and approached his sister. He then grabbed IX, turned her around and bent her over, ripping her clothes off entirely from torso down. Xtasekive proceeded to penetrate IX, however, not with the knife. IX recalled showing no resistance as she claimed that she wanted it. She then later stated she enjoyed the experience very much. After the act was done, Xtasekive disposed of the body while removing all traces of evidence. The two eventually came back to the facility. The Serpent incident, witnessed by most of the staff, March 20th, 2008. Time of the incident 14. After the initial incident, both XVI and IX were evaluated and questioned by Dr. Sokolov, and XXV. Shortly after the Evaluation was done. VI found out about what happened on the night prior. VI went berserk. This was truly the first time that has ever happened, as VI never showed even the slightest bit of anger or frustration before. VI located XDI and proceeded to brutally attack him. The entire staff was alerted to this, as the brawl made quite the mess and quite the commotion. While Vice possessed immense strength already, the state of enragement only further added to it. Vi blindsided XVI. XVI, I was not ready for the attack. V was tossing him through walls like one would toss a basketball. The brawl spread out throughout multiple rooms, but eventually both were grounded with VI on top of XVII while bashing his head. Any normal human would have died from just one of Vi's punches. X2, however, is hardly a normal human, as he was able to survive the beating but was losing consciousness. As the staff gathered around them, nobody dared or even was able to stop what was happening. A staff member was sent to notify both XXV and IX, since neither one was present during this event. V started to regain his composure, having stopped the attack, and then suddenly noticing Stadiv passing in and out of consciousness. Stayal's body started to tremble uncontrollably as his eyes began to roll back in his head. Vi saw this and started to break down crying while yelling, "Oh no, brother, what have I done? Please wake up, brother. Please." It was believed that XVI I was going into shock due to the brain damage he accumulated from VI's hits, however, after witnessing what eventuated. The consensus was an activation of a fight-or-flight response, or hyperarousal. Exfeton started to slowly rise to his feet, with his eyes still rolled completely back. His tongue, which is abnormally long, as was observed earlier on, but was never truly questioned. This was explained by Dr. Gray to be part of his design as it related to his sexual aberration, retracting in and out of his mouth, randomly and seemingly uncontrollably, very much akin to a snake. In fact, at this point, Expion was extremely animalistic in his behaviour. A Spanish nurse, Valeria Martin, saw Exthinth and shouted "La Serpiente de Eden" twice before nearly fainting. Scouties scouted the area until he saw V again and ran up to him at speeds much faster than Exide was capable of before this transformation. Vi was still emotionally broken, confused and completely unready for what happened next. XVI, I pounced on him, beating his head in this time as the roles seemed to reverse. Vi was out cold with just 2 shots from the serpent, and he was unrelenting. Luckily, XXV and IX made it there just in time to stop XXI. XXV talked him out of his state. It took XXV about 5 minutes to calm XXI down. Xia's eyes finally rolled back into their original place as he dropped to one knee, recovering. When asked about this particular transformation, XXI replied with, "I have no recollection of that." Vi was hurt after that incident, however. With proper medical attention and his heightened healing capability, he was able to make a full recovery after 3 days. V later said, "I hope to never see the serpent come out again. VI still feels guilty about the incident to this very day. XVI does not. All of the children are believed to have this ability to revert to a more animalistic state when near death, albeit VI did not receive enough damage for that to occur during this specific incident." Chapter 4-5. The One with No Name. In the rubble far away, a hard drive had been found by a man with no name. As he left the compound to his home, the man did head. Possessing not the details of the wonders and the findings that would tip the scales, he arrived back to his lodgings, warm and welcoming, sitting down at the mainframe, great dose of intrigue, beckoning. Motionless the human sat, a smile his face had crossed, as the nameless fully reckoned what indeed was lost. No longer would he need to board the massive, good old trawler. As in his future, he envisioned swimming in the Dollards! What in the fuck makes you think you can call us that, huh? Exthes shouted amidst the strikes. Fully in contention to be the newest addition to the Guinness World Record book for the highest decibel level, reached through the means of yelling, and yes, of course, the Artiphenoid was quite infuriated. "Is this how you treat guests when they roll up in your motel, you motherfucker?" Shouting while hitting things, XVI's two most favourite activities, seemingly. What the man had articulated was the word dollars, XVII, not dullards. Professor XXV courteously explained to his fervent and rage-governed brother the mishearing. "What?" Wrath had opened the door for an unexpected guest by the name of Confusion as Extheols asked his sibling. "A single night for 5 people will be $60. XXV continued as composure was the sole inhabitant of his quarters. "That is what the man said verbatim, brother," XXV concluded, manoeuvring himself closer to the body of the motel clerk, occupying the frigid floor. Oh's face had conceded ground to indignity, however, not for long. "Next time you speak more fucking clearly so that others can understand, you fucking hear me?" Anger had acquired back the territory most recently lost to shame as XVI continued to yell at the motionless man covering the ground. "He won't have to worry about that any longer. X-Ov."
XXV stated while carefully inspecting the unfortunate one.
"He's dead." Truth was indeed expressed as the man was entirely swathed in the fabric of demise. The duo had suddenly become a trio as Dr. Gray entered the lobby of the motel construct. "What is going on here? What is all of this yelling?" Gray spoke while in motion towards the main desk behind which the two Artiphenoids were located. "Oh, no!" Gray burst out as anxiety grappled with him once he witnessed the corpse on the floor. "What happened to not killing the locals?" he inquired of both Artiphenoids, not just XVII, while truly befuddled. "I got a what happened for you." XTIN's remark was quick. XT's remark was bold. XTIN's remark was taunting, as XTIN's remark was told. "What happened to not bringing the amphetamine with us, huh?" the Artiphenoid asked his father, agitation as his mother. "I am sorry," Xthatanth, "but it just wasn't a priority since we had so little time to leave the facility." Dr. Gray genuinely explained to his son with no irritation or condemnation present. "But there are plenty of bars around here. Perhaps you can just get drunk instead, Xthatanth." Gray once again retained the collected tone. "Yeah, that will have to do." Xyz began to climb down the mountain of blinding rage, having begun to reach the soothing bottom. Dr. Gray, XXV was not to be forgotten as he joined the discourse. "With this unforeseen development, I must ask you to play the role of a motel clerk for the time being, as to not bring any more unnecessary attention for the night. While my brother and I take care of the body, XXV's proposition was filled with the flavour of metal. Yes, I understand, XXV. Dr. Gray understood. This was hardly how the doctor intended to spend the night. However, you have to roll with the punches, as they say. You gentlemen should really go now before any more clients show up. I will get behind the desk once the body is removed, and I will find a way to take care of that bloodstain on the floor there as well. Marcus Gray was speaking to the creations while moving towards the office behind the main counter in hopes of finding the solution needed to mask the previously mentioned stains. Not much more was said as XXV's proposed plan began to unfold. The two brothers carried the corpse out of the building while Dr. Gray had found himself a temporary job as a motel clerk for the night. "Feeling better, sweetie?" Ix blanketed her brother with compassion as she inquired while the two waited outside the motel room by the car. "Yeah, terse and honest V I was. The food really helped, huh?" Ix followed up with another inquiry while smiling at the giant. "Yeah." Concise yet again. Best things come in small packages after all. "Are you still hungry?" The little Artiphenoid's smile continued to expand while talking to the big Artiphenoid.
"Yeah."
Third time was the charm indeed. I did smile back on this occasion, however. While the twins had their pleasantries, in the background was suddenly heard an outcry of sorts. "Ah, God fucking damn it!" XV had filled the lobby with the wonderful music that was his shouting, so why not the outside? "What is it this time, brother?" XXV inquired of his younger sibling without any change in his voice. "I stepped in fucking dog shit while carrying this motherfucker. For fuck's sake!" Seglein stepped in dog stool while carrying the lifeless body of the motel clerk. XXV, who had occupied a position in front of his brother prior to the incident, had taken a moment to stop and look at the material that was now causing him the overwhelming grief. "The substance that you have had the unfortunate pleasure of stepping in is not one belonging to a dog, XXV stated while quickly glancing at the fecal matter. This excrement was made by a horse. XXV was now looking at his unlucky sibling. "That's even worse. Who still uses goddamn horses in this goddamn age, goddammit?" Xtheon was unrelenting with the shouting, however. The Artiphenoid was not fully controlled by anger any longer, as annoyance began to supplant that governance. The two brothers continued their movement with the body of the dead clerk still on top of XDI's shoulder. Shortly after the two had returned to motion, XXV began speaking once more. "Actually, brother, horses are still very much preferred to the automobile in certain parts of the country, as the rural area dictates the inability of acquisition of just such mechanical constructs, while the equus Cabalus is readily available due to the fact that many familial stables are." "Oh, it begins with this shit again," XFS stated while rolling his eyes at his brother, fully aware of the verbose flood about to commence. "Stepping in dog shit is more exciting than this." Fatty muttered to himself while following his sibling to a location where the disposal of the corpse could be arranged at. "It was horseshit, brother." XXV swiftly corrected his sibling before returning to the lesson. It is estimated that these majestic creatures were first domesticated around the year of 3000 BC, and since then had become quite a boon for the human species. "I wonder what happened over there?" X inquired rhetorically as she examined the two siblings in movement while the lecture, considering the local horses, was providing the ambience as it was being presented to. "Ixtar and his instructive older sibling. I don't think I want to know," V replied, having regained the ability to speak while using more than a single word with his gaze fixated on his older brothers, much like his sister. "Anyway, we should start moving now and get inside the motel room," Ike said, shifting her vision onto her sibling while leaving the hood of the car which she had been sitting on as the two talked. Vi remained silent and nodded instead, shortly after which he grabbed all the bags that were brought along and followed his sister towards the motel. While in motion, the duo had once again initiated an exchange. "What do you think America will be like?" Vi inquired, carrying not only the weight of the bags, but the heavy tonnage of intrigue as well. "Do you think it will be like in the movies?" he asked, resembling a child in tone. IX produced a heartening laugh as a result of her brother's kid-like inquisition before responding. "Of course not, Cutie-Eppy," she replied as the two walked the desolate and darkness-ridden street. "Films are many things. A creative outlet for some, a fantasy or wish fulfillment for others, or often a political tool to spread influence in order to gain control over those who are gullible enough to believe all they see." Desai was entranced by the response relayed onto him by his bright sister. However, what they never are is an accurate depiction of reality. They are not supposed to be after all, Ix concluded. VI's facial expression did succumb to the changes brought on by a feeling of disappointment, however slight, yet the big artiphenoid knew fully well that what was recently stated was entirely correct. Regardless, VI was a huge appreciator of the moving pictures. "What do you think it will be like then, sis?" Vi's curiosity was hardly satiated, much like his appetite. "Well," X had taken a slight respite as she locked her sight on the ground while walking. "It is going to be a country like any other, with a ruling class and a peasant class, with the ones who make the laws and therefore can easily escape them, and the ones who don't have that luxury and are forced to abide by them. A country where many tools of influence are utilized on those who are unfortunately too feeble-minded to understand the manipulation. And a country where most inhabitants play a role rather than be their true selves. A country where platitudes supplant actions, and a country where ambition for change is considered radical while ineffectiveness is considered ambitious. A country where the separation is not only existent through land states, but states of mind, as many occupy their own bubbles while surrounded by others like them, completely disconnected from all those who aren't. IX required another moment, while her pupil, the 6, was greatly anticipant of the continuation. "Like I said, Cutie-Eppy, it's going to be just like any other place." I enjoyed listening to his sister, most certainly. However, the response he received did affect the Colossus. "I don't want to go now," Vi said jokingly, yet the foundation of this house of humour was built on sincerity. Flags laughed at her brother again in the same heartwarming manner as before. "Well, it is inescapable, I am afraid." The two were still in motion while conversing. However, they did begin to slow down while approaching the staircase leading to the motel. It is a byproduct of the human condition after all, and can be observed everywhere you go. X was now looking at her brother as the two stopped entirely before the main entry of the construction. Vi quickly glanced at the motel sign before returning his gaze onto his stunning sister, shortly after which he stated, "Do you think the food will be good here?" As the bewitching Lady Knight advanced on, so did the endeavours of the 5 remaining members of the family. Dr. Gray's first night at his new job was not an entirely difficult one, as there were hardly any clients, and the few that did show up, Gray was able to handle with ease. The two brothers had of course made their way deep into the forest, where Exive prepared a grave for the recently departed motel clerk, while continuing to be serenaded by XXV, who had made it past the domestication of horses and into the utilization of the animal as it related to agriculture and warfare. However, while the two were in the process of lectures and digging, a bystander was out on a night stroll in the woods, not the most usual affair, quite frankly. Nevertheless, the man had spotted the duo amidst the act and had become a witness. Appropriate measures had to be administered, after which XYDI began to dig yet another hole while XXV resumed his presentation. As important as horses were in agriculture, the practical use of the animal in the scenarios of combat was even more significant. The animal, of course, did in fact replace donkeys and mules which had been utilized as weight carriers prior, however. It is important to realize that horses served a great multitude of purposes while on the battlefield. XXV bombarded his younger brother with torpedoes of information, while gesticulating and towering over him, having been located on top of the forest ground as opposed to XD who was deep inside the depression. I am beginning to wish I got fucked by a horse so that I wouldn't be around to hear any more of this horseshit, Second said in a defeated tone while industriously working the shovel, wishing perhaps it was his own grave he was digging. I am afraid that you would not succumb to death after such an act of zoophilia, brother. XXV took a reprieve to address the proverbial elephant, or the horse in this instance, in the room. I was kidding, XXV? Explosaturn stated while still in the act of spading and while still in the state of inanition. Right, XXV said, having quickly glanced at his brother. Let's begin with the origins of those who had first utilized horses in combat, and for that we have to go to Eurasia. Vi and IX, get your mind out of the gutter, were of course located and fully situated inside the motel, anticipating the return of the two older artiphenoids. The motel itself was quite incongruous with the rest of the scenery, as it was fairly well maintained and even recently renovated, with new rooms still being constructed. The pair of artificial creations found themselves in just one of those newly crafted rooms where a new television set, a new stove, and a new refrigerator could all be observed alongside a new shower. The building itself carried a quaint look resembling a cabin. It was in fact quite pleasing aesthetically, with logs and bricks utilized as the main components of the establishment. The floor was covered with a massive red rug of a darker shade, while the wallpaper depicted a forest, and it too carried a hint of the darker shades of scarlet. Fire crackling provided the room with a calming ambience as V was positioned on the bed flipping through channels while waiting for his sister to egress the confines of the shower. There isn't a food channel here, the deeply disappointed Vipe proclaimed once he witnessed his sister's return to the main portion of the room. They have all sorts of porn on here, but not a single cooking channel. IX had taken a shower with the H2O, while I had been showered with sadness. Write a letter to the station. IX answered while searching.